Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and realizing something almost impossible has happened. You never need to work for money again. Not because you won the lottery, not because you sold a company, not because you inherited a fortune and started slowly destroying it, but because your money now produces $1 million in interest every single year, and the principal? Untouched. Every 12 months, another $1 million arrives. That is roughly $83,000 every month. Almost $20,000 every week, more than $2,700 every single day. Whether you are working, sleeping, traveling, getting sick, raising children, or staring at the ceiling wondering what the hell you are supposed to do with your life, the money keeps coming. Now here is the interesting part. Having $1 million of annual income at 25 years old is not the same experience as having $1 million of annual income at 55. The number stays the same, but you change. Your desires change, your fears change, your definition of freedom changes, and eventually, money stops being something you spend and becomes something you use to shape reality. So today, you are going to live this life, not for 5 minutes, but across decades. From the chaos of your 20s to the final years when money may still be flowing long after you are gone. This is what living on a $1 million annual interest income could feel like at every stage of life. You are 24 years old, your income is $83,000 a month, and the most dangerous thing about your life is not poverty, it is the complete absence of financial friction. Want to spend 3 months in Tokyo? Done. Want a villa in Bali next month? Done. Want to fly business class to Switzerland because someone invited you to a private networking dinner? Done. At this age, the world stops feeling like a collection of countries. It starts feeling like one enormous neighborhood. You do not really live anywhere. You rotate. 3 weeks in Dubai, a month in Thailand, 2 months in Lisbon, a private apartment in Singapore, then New York, then Iceland, then somewhere you had never even heard of 6 months earlier. You build what looks like the ultimate permanent luxury travel circuit. But this is not a vacation. That distinction matters, because at 20-something, you still want to prove yourself. You do not want to simply consume wealth. You want to build something. So you run a remote business. Maybe it is an AI company. Maybe a media business. Maybe software. Maybe an investment vehicle. And because you do not need that business to pay your rent, you can take risks almost nobody else can take. Your competitors need cash flow. You need curiosity. They need to survive. You can afford to experiment. That changes everything. You hire brilliant people. You test strange ideas. You kill bad projects quickly. You can spend $50,000 learning a skill that may never make you $1. Because making more money is no longer the only point. Becoming more capable is, and your calendar starts filling with events most people never see. Private founder dinners, mastermind retreats, invite-only conferences, $10,000 weekends where 20 entrepreneurs sit in a mountain resort discussing business, technology, and the future. At first, the price feels ridiculous. Then you realize something. You are not paying for the hotel. You are paying for compression. Instead of spending 10 years accidentally meeting powerful people, you can meet 10 of them in a weekend. One relationship introduces you to another. One founder becomes your partner. One investor becomes your closest friend. One conversation changes the direction of your life. And suddenly, networking stops feeling like exchanging business cards. It becomes architecture. You are designing the human network around your future. But the 20s are dangerous. Because with $83,000 arriving every month, stupidity becomes expensive very quickly. You begin saying yes to experiences simply because you can. Supercars, private aviation, experimental technology, extreme sports, zero-gravity flights, luxury festivals. You build absurd computer setups in rented penthouses. You buy cameras you barely know how to use. You wear watches that cost more than your parents' first house. Everything is available. And that creates a psychological problem most people never experience. When almost nothing is financially impossible, what actually matters? At first, your answer is excitement. more countries, more parties, more people, more experiences, more speed. But eventually, something changes. You are standing in some beautiful place. Maybe Monaco, maybe the Maldives, maybe looking at Earth through the window of a zero-gravity flight, and a strange thought appears. You can buy almost anything here, except more time. Money can upgrade a flight. It cannot create another 25th birthday. Money can buy access. It cannot buy another year with someone who dies. Money can eliminate inconvenience. It cannot negotiate with aging. And for the first time, your $1 million income stops making you feel invincible. It makes you aware. Your 20s teach you the first great lesson of wealth. When money becomes abundant, time becomes the real currency. Then you wake up one morning, and constant movement no longer feels like freedom. It feels exhausting. You are 34 now. You still love travel, but you no longer want your life packed into premium luggage. You want bases, real ones, places designed around your lifestyle. You begin acquiring property, but not random luxury homes. You think strategically. You start looking at jurisdictions with favorable tax structures, strong infrastructure, security, and global connectivity. Dubai becomes attractive. Maybe Singapore, maybe Switzerland, maybe El Salvador, depending on your risk tolerance and worldview. Now the house itself becomes a project. You are no longer buying bedrooms. You are designing an operating system for your life. A dedicated studio, a gym, recovery rooms, cold plunge, sauna, office, guest wing, security, backup power, perfect lighting, high-speed connectivity, everything built intentionally. In your 20s, you wanted access to everything. In your 30s, you want control over your environment. And then health becomes a serious investment. Not because you are old, because you finally understand compounding. A small financial advantage compounded for 30 years becomes huge. So, what happens if health works the same way? You hire a personal chef. Not because you cannot cook, because your nutrition no longer needs to depend on discipline at 9:30 p.m. after a long day. You run blood tests, hormone panels, sleep tracking, body composition scans. You experiment with recovery protocols. You pay specialists to analyze things most people ignore until something goes wrong. Suddenly, health is not something you think about when you get sick. It becomes infrastructure. And there is something almost funny about it. In your 20s, you used money to feel alive. In your 30s, you use money to stay alive longer. But another shift is happening. You no longer get the same dopamine rush from buying things. The fifth luxury watch is not 5 times better than the first. Another supercar does not transform your identity. Another 5-star hotel looks suspiciously similar to the last one. So your attention starts moving outward. You start investing, not only to make money, you already have income. You start funding companies because you want to participate in the future. A young founder shows you a technology that could reduce water waste. You write a check. Another team is building AI software for education. You invest. A biotech startup is trying something ambitious. You fund a small position. Some fail. Of course they fail. Maybe most fail. But failure feels different when it is not threatening your lifestyle. You can fund high-risk ideas because you are not betting your ability to eat. And that gives you a privilege far greater than luxury. You can afford patience. Your 30s become a decade of intentional construction, permanent bases, health systems, investment networks, family structures, long-term relationships, and maybe children. Now wealth becomes less about escape and more about foundation. Then you reach your 40s, and something strange happens. You have money, you have experience, you have connections, you have credibility, but most importantly, you have no financial reason to obey anyone. This is where wealth becomes power, not loud power, not social media power, real independence. Because if your $1 million income arrives without touching your principal, you can spend years working on things that never produce a financial return. You can fund research, You can support causes. You can build schools. You can finance legal campaigns. You can become involved in public policy. You can support political organizations. You can create institutions. You can influence conversations, simply because you can dedicate time and capital without needing an immediate payoff. And that is when wealth becomes morally complicated, because money gives you leverage. And leverage forces you to answer a difficult question: what are you going to do with it? At 25, spending $50,000 irresponsibly only affected you. At 45, allocating $50 million over the next decade could affect thousands of people. The responsibility becomes heavier. At the same time, your family life becomes more complicated. Your children grow up in a world where almost every material problem can be solved instantly. That sounds wonderful, until you realize struggle taught you many of the skills that created your life: patience, delayed gratification, resourcefulness, ambition, resilience. How do you teach scarcity to someone who has never experienced it? How do you teach respect for money when your monthly interest income is higher than most annual salaries? Your child wants the newest phone. You can buy 100 of them. They want a car at 16. You could buy a Ferrari without noticing the financial impact. But should you? Now parenting becomes less about providing and more about withholding intelligently. You start designing constraints, allowances, budgets, jobs, responsibilities, investment accounts they have to manage. Maybe they fly economy while you could afford private. Not because you are cheap, because you understand that convenience without context can destroy appreciation. Meanwhile, your own relationship with luxury becomes increasingly strange. You still buy things, but now you prefer assets with stories: rare watches, historic manuscripts, art, collectibles, maybe fractionalized digital art with AI provenance, maybe experimental vehicles from technological eras that never became mainstream, maybe rare vintage hydrogen prototypes. The financial return becomes part of the entertainment. You are no longer just buying an object, you are curating history. By your 40s, money has transformed from a ticket into a tool of influence. At 54, you no longer want more stimulation. You want depth. There are places you could visit, restaurants you could try, cars you could buy. But you have already seen enough luxury to understand something most young people cannot believe. Luxury becomes normal. And once luxury becomes normal, it stops feeling luxurious. So now you start pursuing mastery. Maybe you have always loved astronomy. You build a private observatory, not a telescope on the balcony, a real facility, professional equipment, a dedicated location away from light pollution. You hire researchers. You fund observations. Maybe your work contributes nothing major to science. Maybe it does. But for the first time, you can pursue curiosity at a level usually reserved for institutions. Maybe astronomy is not your thing. Maybe it is archaeology, or music, or ocean research, or agriculture, or artificial intelligence, or restoring historic buildings. Your $1 million a year becomes a personal research grant. You are both the benefactor and the student. And this changes your relationship with work. You stop asking, how much money will this make? You start asking, is this worth 10 years of my life? That is a far more dangerous question, because now you have the freedom to answer it truthfully. Then comes the next challenge: inheritance. Your children are adults. Maybe grandchildren are appearing, and your wealth now needs an educational system around it. Because leaving someone money is easy. Leaving someone the judgment required to manage money is much harder. So you teach them how the engine works. The principle is not a pile of money. It is infrastructure. Destroy the principle, and the income disappears. Protect the principle, and future generations may benefit. You explain risk. Inflation, taxes, diversification, fraud, leverage, lifestyle creep. You show them how fortunes die, not always through one catastrophic investment, often through thousands of small acts of stupidity. Too much spending, Too little governance, family conflict, bad advisors, entitlement, no shared mission. So wealth education becomes one of your biggest projects. And ironically, you become stricter about money than you were when you had less of it. Because now you are not protecting a bank account, you are protecting a system. At this stage, your greatest luxury is no longer objects, it is time. So you begin buying back every hour possible. Drivers, assistants, household staff, travel managers, accountants, lawyers, property managers, security, medical coordinators, people who solve small problems before those problems ever reach you. You stop booking flights. You stop arguing with service providers. You stop waiting on hold. You stop doing administrative work. Not because those tasks are beneath you, because your remaining time is becoming visibly finite. At 25, an hour felt cheap. At 55, an hour feels expensive. Your wealth is now being deployed to defend your calendar. Eventually, another transformation happens. You look at your accounts. The money is still flowing. $1 million this year, another million next year, another after that. Your principal remains. Maybe it has even grown, but you do not need more. There are only so many meals you can eat. Only so many homes you can live in. Only so many cars you can drive. Only so many trips you can take. The question is no longer, what can I buy? The question becomes, what continues after me? Maybe you establish an endowment, maybe scholarships, maybe research institutions, maybe hospitals, maybe conservation projects, maybe a fund supporting entrepreneurs for the next 100 years. You stop thinking in annual budgets. You start thinking in generations. And this might be the final psychological evolution of wealth. At 25, money meant escape. Escape from jobs. Escape from bills. Escape from restrictions. At 35, money meant control. Control over your environment, your health, your schedule. At 45, money meant influence, the ability to move people, capital, and ideas. At 55, money meant time, the ability to remove everything unnecessary. And now, money means expression. Your capital becomes a canvas. The world will eventually forget what car you drove. Nobody will care how expensive your hotel suite was. Your grandchildren will not remember the exact balance of your bank account, but they may remember the institution you created, the people you helped, the ideas you funded, the values you protected. And then one day, perhaps near the very end, there is one final beautiful realization. The income engine does not care whether you are present. The investments continue producing. The structures continue operating. The foundations continue distributing capital. The companies continue employing people. The scholarship continues funding students. The money keeps moving. You spent your youth trying to become financially immortal, and eventually, you realize financial immortality was never the goal. Meaning was. Because $1 million a year can buy an extraordinary life, but it cannot decide what an extraordinary life means. Only you can do that. And maybe that is the strangest truth about extreme wealth. When survival disappears, money stops giving you answers. It starts asking you questions. What do you actually value? Who do you want around you? What deserves your attention? What deserves 10 years of your life? And what do you want to leave behind when your time finally runs out? Because the principal may survive, the interest may continue, the institutions may remain. But your time? That was always the one asset you were spending every single day. And unlike money, it never compounds back. So if $1 million landed in your account every year forever, the real question is not what would you buy. The real question is, who would you become?